Don Mazzella here again for Small Business Digest. And now we're going to hear from the other side of the coin in a little ways. Um, we're going to hear from someone who's going to talk about the employees and what they're not hearing. And I've been really looking forward to this interview. His name is John Via Socha, and he's joining us from a West Coast law firm, and I'm very interested. Welcome to the program.
Thank you so much, Don. It's fantastic to be invited. For those of you who may not know me, my name is John Socha. I'm the Chief Operating Officer of the Hemet Law Group. I'm also the host of Gossip Without Prejudice. We profile legal misconduct and advocate for change through storytelling. Um, I am also one of the first employees of the Hemet Law Group, and we have now grown to a size of just around 20 people in about 2 years. So it's been a very exciting journey, and I can't wait to tell folks about that.
Well, good. Well, since you covered two of my questions, my only third question is, how can people reach you?
Oh, absolutely. So you can find my podcast at gossipwithoutprejudice.com or just Gossip Without Prejudice on any podcast distribution platform. You can find me on LinkedIn just at John Avi Socha, Socha. And you can find our law firm's website at hemetlaw.com. That's HEMMATLAW.com.
Okay. Well, now let's talk about the subject. What are employers not telling their employees?
I think the biggest disconnect a lot of employers have, and I'm going to focus my answer particularly on Gen Z. So I was born in 1997. Most people consider me either the very youngest millennial or the very oldest Gen Z, depending on who you ask or who's looking. Um, and I think the zeitgeist in the labor market right now is that a lot of Gen Z employees aren't worth dirt. They show no loyalty, they have no enthusiasm for the mission, whatever it might be. They're not competent, they don't have the office skills, whatever it might be. There's a lot of stuff in the air. And I come on to podcasts and talk a lot about how employers aren't speaking particularly to the needs, wants, and desires of their youngest employees, which is tragic because their youngest employees are the, by definition, one way or another, the future of their company or the future of every other company that they're competing against. Um, I don't think people are showing their youngest employees much loyalty, and they're not showing them a path to climb the ladder that either their parents or their grandparents were given in the same way.
Well, that's very true. I haven't come from the school of, let's say, jump, and you'd asking me how high, you know. Uh, 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 we simply learn a different set of rules. But having run several companies and a lot of big companies, my question to you is, what do I owe you, the employee?
I think what's missing most critically, I mean, it's to some degree it's about the paycheck, but it's not really about the paycheck. What was promised to the old to previous generations wasn't so much money as so much as it was loyalty and a cause to serve, right? It's very popular for there to be strong layoff cycles in the last 20 years for both from big and large company or big and small companies that were simply not seen in the 60s, 70s, and 80s at the same magnitude and volume. It's almost become like a badge of honor for a lot of companies to get up and say, oh, we've cut our bottom line by our salary expense by 20%. They've got Zuckerberg on podcasts wearing cool gold chains and talking about how his company needs to be more masculine, and then when laid off 3,000 or so people a week or two later. And there's what that has done is it has hollowed out the cause to believe in the company, right? What you owe me isn't just a paycheck. uh, you as an employer, what you owe me is something to believe in, right? To tell their rank and file that, like, the work you do isn't just transactional, it matters. And I'm going to show you it matters by taking care of you, not just for this payroll cycle or this quarter or this year or maybe this decade, but for the rest of your career. And that is difficult to solve because a cause is what is also most difficult to provide, right? You can't fake the authenticity, the buy-in that a lot of companies try to. They hold pizza parties, they give everybody, $10 Ivers gift cards, and then think that they've shown their employees that everything matters. But I think you owe your employees a cause to believe in, and that's what we do at Hemet Law. We're trying to change the practice of law for the better. Now, your audience probably doesn't know this, but we specifically do family law. So we do civil litigation, not just fighting for child support, but fighting for the future with your children, for safety from your abuser, for the very sense of security itself. And so much of what we do comes from our willingness and desire to serve our community. And we try really hard to tell our employees every single day that what they do matters. And it's why, so far, everyone likes working here. It's been a real treasure to join them on that journey.
Yeah, okay, well, let's stop a minute.
Hmm.
I say to my employee, um, we're going to create an environment where you like working here. Okay. What I never hear back is what they're going to do for me, the boss. You know,
Hmm.
uh,
I think because I agree. I'm going to push. I'll not push back against you, Don. Push back in general
please
against the
do.
concept. The what do I do is I show up first. I
No,
trust that I've hired the right people, and I act always as if my employees are going to give 100%. And then I never let that voice in the back of my head as a manager who doubts and who feels fear and is an irrational lizard part of my brain. Uh, I always assume the best, and by doing so, you foster an environment where people actually do return the favor. I think the higher up of any power structure you are, I argue the more limbs you got to go out on, right? The more risk you got to take. Not saying necessarily it's right and it's just, but I think that's the way the world works. And as an employer, if your team aren't showing up, it's one of two issues. Either you aren't going on enough limbs for them, or you've hired the wrong people. Either way, it's possible you've hired the wrong people, but I'm assuming you're not. Either way, the philosophy at the Hemet Law Group is it's a management issue. It's never the employee's problem. We give them credit for everything that's done right, and we take credit for everything that's done wrong. It's either an instructional issue, we've got the wrong person in the wrong position, or we haven't gone the extra mile to warrant that loyalty that's so hard to earn.
let's talk about Google, for instance, where the employees are saying you should not uh, work for the government. You know, I mean, that's not their decision. Number one, and number two, it's disloyal. Okay. Uh, I happen to know an instance of 30 years ago where someone said that during the Vietnam crisis, and the owner said, "You're right, you're fired." Anybody else who agree with him, he's gone. And he made it stick. And we're talking about a very, very big company. But today we try to coddle them. Okay. By the way, I hope you view this as simply trying to talk together, and we're not arguing. Please.
No, no, I mean, that's the groundbreak of every discussion is seeing both sides. I completely understand, Don. And I think we coddle, but I think that's a positive change, right? I think it's a good thing in that, if you go out you got to listen to your employees more, you got to go out on more limbs if you've got the right people. The thing about Google is that what's applicable to large companies are not applicable to 85, 95% of the job market, in that they only have the very best people there, right? Because they either have the most money or have the prestige necessary to compensate for less money. And either way, if you've already got, by and large, a team of A players, to use the term, then really the only final solution is whether or not they fit at this company, right? There's no wiggle room. Us mortals, we have to work with the job market we have, and we can cultivate fantastic talent. They don't do that at FANG companies at Google, Facebook, Amazon, because they have all of the talent they need coming in the door every single day. They can pick who they want and they can get rid of who they can't. Um, as to the wider cultural issues, I can only control the way we manage things here at the Hammett Law Group. Uh, but either way, the number of people who see, you know, the respect coming back from their employers, I think those people stick around, and I would make a strong case that coddling is the best, if to lack of a better word, is the best way to grow institutional knowledge and compound your workforce over time in a way that it's just not possible to when you have a lot of churn.
Well, this program is about small business, so let's switch a little bit and let's talk small business. We tend in small business, um, based on my experience and others, that we find people that are less willing to take a chance, but more willing to trade security for long-term growth. Um, how do you get them to do both?
The it all goes back to the cause to believe in. Like, first thing we do when we hire someone new is we say, "Welcome to Hammett Law. Welcome to the rocket ship," so to speak. Here's what we will do for you. We'll pay you XYZ. You will do ABC for us. And then here's the crucially missing part is we've established the transaction. We then say, here is what your work means to your community. You protect single mothers. You get fathers time with their kids when their kids are withheld. You get people out of unjust child support. You make real differences in real people's lives. And then you finish off that conversation by saying, now that we know this situation matters, here's what you need to do to get promoted, right? Lay out the specific qualified KPI roadmap ahead of time, and then as they walk it, work with them as a management team, and then along the way, catch them doing everything right. Right? You never catch anyone doing something wrong. You catch them doing it right. Like, they wrote reports the way they wanted to. Their work product is fantastic. Their billings are up this month. Say that at every opportunity, and then when problems inevitably arise, because they always do, never structure it as an ask from management. Say, hey, your teammates need you to do this, right? Talk to well, I'm okay being burned in effigy if I have to, because like, I'm the manager, I've got to have difficult conversations. It's my responsibility to field those issues immediately because no one else can. Um, Structure it as like, hey, for the good of the team to accomplish this mission, we need these things done. And if you can't do that, that's okay. We'll find someone else who can. We'll give you a nice severance, get you out the door, hire fast, uh, impress the mission, the objectives, and the positivity on them all at once. And if they can't handle it after 2 or 3 months, fire them quickly before they cause problems. And if you do that enough times with enough consistency, you'll get all the A players you need on one team. And then what's great about that is Steve Jobs famously said that, A players hire A players and B players hire C players. Uh, so, like, the quality of the team propagates. I can hire 5 fantastic people and then hire one good person or okay person, and then within 6 months, that okay person is now an A player because they either don't want to stick out or because the culture is infectious. And that's what I'm the biggest guardian of. I'm not the guardian of the individual per se, though I do have conversations with individuals. I'm the guardian of the environment that lifts and motivates everyone up, right? It's a collective. I think that's what managers lose too often, is that it's a collective objective, not an individual objective, right? The problem isn't that we aren't billing enough. The problem is that the team isn't motivated to bill enough. So which team members are setting that poor example? Is it the cause? Is the understanding of what impact this has? Is there a disconnect of communication? Don't hunt down the people who aren't billing enough and flog them in the town square, because then just the beatings will continue until morale improves. But instead, turn that around and try and figure out what's getting in everyone's way, and then move whatever that thing is. Right? That's your job as a manager, is to get out of the way as much as possible. If you find yourself making lots and lots of inane rules, like don't sleep on the job, probably means there's you've got the wrong people there, if that makes sense.
Well, let me ask you this question. You bring up something which is always a bugaboo. When and how do you decide to fire? And how do
When
you,
when do I decide to fire? Let me think. I think when I decide to fire, and at first I'm going to back up and cheat the question a little bit, Don, because like I want to say that I don't believe in making it work. I've gone to bat for coddling. I've gone to bat for having those communications and sitting down and having those discussions. But I want to make it clear that one of the most treasured responsibilities of a manager is to fire quickly, right? You fire quickly, but you don't fire unjustly, which is like what people do when like someone gets one thing wrong and they're just gone. I think that's a great way to kill morale. It's a balancing act, but I have like a two strikes rule, right? If assuming that we have shared expectations and objectives explicitly and clearly and publicly, ideally in writing too, because we're attorneys. If we've shared those expectations and directly told the person, they're on notice. If they violate those intentionally, not just a silly mistake, because human error is inevitable in the long run, but if they violate those explicitly by choice, um, then we say, hey, no problem. This is an issue that everyone suffers from, and then we'll give them an explanation of why it's so important if they couldn't figure it out on their own or if they missed it, right?
hmm,
And then the second time, then we say, okay, this is the second time, and we're clear that like if XYZ explicit issues happen again, we are going to dismiss you. Here's how we will do it when we do it. And here's how we'll help you avoid that, right? That's the critical part. Like we want to help them succeed. And then if they get to the third instance, we just say, hey, I get it. We're all human. We work together and communicate in different ways. But this isn't working out. You've got to go. You're causing problems not for management, but for your fellow man, your coworkers. Leave. And it's at that point when we get to the second issue, when it comes up again, is when most managers sort of decide to make it work. Um, but like once is a fluke, two is a pattern. As soon as you have a pattern, they should go. And that's because the worst places I have always universally worked, and this is an experience replicated by many, I think, in the job market. The worst places I have always worked are the offices that refused to have the difficult conversations, right? Where everybody had to sort of tiptoe around each other or figure out the quirks of the middle manager or, just avoid the guy on the working floor that was just an absolute pain, but that had good metrics. That creates this intricate web of politics and unspoken rules that make things really hard to navigate unless you're a very specific type of person. Those are always the worst places to work, and it is management's job, in my opinion, to avoid that at all costs. Make everything as simple as possible, and the way you do that is you find people with quirks. I don't care how much money they make the business, but they should leave, because even if we have an employer that is or an employee that is like 3 times more productive than the other employees, he's probably bringing down the 10 people around him by 30%. Because they've got to devote brain power away from their tasks to dealing with each other. That makes it harder to build rapport, harder to build morale, harder to build communication, and it has hugely profound long-term consequences that most managers don't know about because that cost is expressed in opportunity cost, not in direct cost, where they are versus where they could have been. And that's often really hard to see, even in hindsight. And that's what I think that managers need to like really focus down on is realizing, you know, who's your worst employee? Who would you fire? Everyone thinks of one person immediately. In my opinion, always do it. Right? If you ask me who would you fire on your team right now, I couldn't give you an answer because that means so far everything's working. Uh, that's sort of where Hemet Law lands, anyways.
well, before we go further, can your website and how other people can reach you?
Yeah, certainly. So HemmettLaw.com, HemmatLaw.com, Hemmett Law. We're the Hemmett Law Group in Seattle, Washington. Or you can go to gossipwithoutprejudice.com. We talk about issues in the legal industry. We profile attorneys who have done crazy things, judges who might be thrown off the bench, and other issues and topics that most people aren't aware of. We're actually prepping an episode on predatory law schools right now. It's going to be pretty exciting.
Mm. Let's talk about the other side of the problem. Someone comes to you and says, a woman comes to you and says, "I'm being harassed." Okay, uh, um, you know, there's always two sides to every question. Okay, unfortunately, right now the pendulum uh, is now uh, that anytime a woman complains, the man is wrong. You start off with that assumption. I may switch back a little bit, but how do you go about determining who's right or who's? And I'll leave it at that.
Well, I think what's right is that nobody, I want to take a strong stance that nobody should feel unsafe at work, regardless of their gender, race, creed, or nationality. Right? I want to draw a hard, bright line. That being said, managers cannot respond to generalities. If somebody comes to me with accusations of any wrongdoing, man or woman, the first thing we would do is say, okay, tell us when, where, and what day. Do you have anything in writing we can see? Because if someone comes to us with generalities, right, it's like, I don't like this person, they bother me, they keep me from doing my job. And it's like, well, that's all useful information to know you feel that way, but I need specifics, right? Any any management team cannot be maximally productive in our intervention if we don't have information on who, what, when, or why in concrete factual circumstances. The good news for us is Hemet Law in particular, um, is that almost all of our communications are in writing, right? We have all work in close proximity. We have an open floor plan office. Um, Hopefully that will never happen to us, but my key is just to rely on the evidence, right? That we never ignore the evidence of our eyes and ears, and I think that's always the best place to stop, start, and end.
But women tend to have the belief, I've been told by many experts, that it's their fault that something happens. And it takes almost double the effort to overcome this. How do you get, how, in your opinion, do you get them to come forward?
I think that all starts with our mission. Here, our line of work specifically, we deal with DV and harassment every single day, right? We know the signs. It would, you mean, not that we ever expect this to happen to us, but it would be very hard to get away with it here because everyone spends all our days hunting abusers and harassers, right? We see the signs. I think what makes it so hard to overcome that burden of evidence is that most people aren't attorneys and don't understand how the legal system works. And ultimately, the legal system is accountable for, all the lapses in harassment, sexual misconduct that we see in the workplace because a normal human isn't going to get harassed and then say, gee, I should write that down, right? They're going to say, oh my God, how terrible. My boss is asking for sexual favors. I'm going to go home and cry about this, and I'm not going to write out a concise timeline of everything that happens. It's not human to write down a transcript, right? It's not human to write a log, right? Because the first thing that's going to happen is that woman is rightly going to go to HR and say, hey, this happened, and HR, who's accountable to the legal industry, to the legal frameworks, are going to ask who, what, when, where, why, and then all the woman's going to be able to do is sort of gesture vaguely. And then the fact that that has happened so many times throughout history lends this air of skepticism to these claims, deserve it or not. Um, all I can say to that issue, I'm not so much a commentator on workplace conduct, is write it down, right? Because selfishly, the company is afraid of allegations you can prove, like any company should be. Uh, and B, if you have a good management team, providing specific concrete data for them to act on will help them act far more surgically than they could if they went in there with a hammer and started swinging. Because they can sort of gesture in the direction of an issue, but they often can't identify it without your help. And then the final thing I'll add here is if you are being harassed at work and your management team isn't at all sympathetic to your issues and they're obtusely stonewalling any investigation, right? This all assumes a good faith investigation on the part of the company, right? If that is not happening, you need to leave immediately. Your safety is not worth it. I'd speak directly to the employees on that. There are lots of employers out there who will treat you very fairly, and I really hope that you can land on your feet.
Well, we only have a couple of minutes left. First, I'd like you to your website again, and then have about a minute to leave our audience with whatever you wanted.
I first off, HemmettLaw.com, gossipwithoutprejudice.com. You can find me on LinkedIn at John Avi Socha. That's JohnAviSocha. And the only thing I'd say is that the business of business is people, right? I think no matter where you are, in what industry you're in, at what level in the hierarchy you work, your relationships with others, your ability to craft a story, to craft a narrative, whatever your objectives are, focus on the people skills, right? Focus on serving your team if you are a manager in not just general but concrete ways. And if you're an employee, focus on making your boss's life easier. And if they're a good boss, they will reciprocate. And I think whenever law students, entrepreneurs, business owners come to me asking me, what can I do better? It doesn't matter what they're doing. My first answer is always work on your storytelling, right? Storytelling doesn't mean falsehood, it means structural communication. Your ability to communicate your ideas, beliefs, and perspectives will have massive implications on your career at any level of any industry. So I would always emphasize get your story out there, get straight on how you can tell others, even others who agree with you, what you're thinking, and you will see fantastic dividends.
Well, on that note, we say, John, Avi Socha, thank you for a great half hour. Have a great day.
Oh, thank you so much, Don. I appreciate the chance to speak with you.